Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns and today we're going to be taking a quick look over the ship price changes for the upcoming 323 patch. Standard disclaimers apply here more than ever. It's PTU and things do tend to fluctuate around, so in the coming weeks before we hit live, there still could be change. But with some substantial price hikes to talk about, I think it's pretty important to look at. So if this sounds good to you, grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. As you may know if you've watched my stuff before, I tend to heavily focus on buying ships in-game. Quite simply, I think it's one of the best features Star Citizen's PU environment has. Shore hangars might wipe from time to time, but you really can start the game with one of the cheapest starter packs and work your way up to the vast majority of ships. New ships tend to be added exclusively for backers who pledged for them for a couple of patches, but then they make their way into the in-game ship shops at Crusader, Hurston and ArcCorp. With these price hikes, this is liable to be a bit harder going forward, but to be fair, CIG have warned on numerous occasions that in-game prices were far below what they expected them to end up as, so a jump now does make sense. If nothing else, it will just help us get more used to stuff costing more. If you are interested in getting into SC, I'd still very much recommend the starter ship route though. It'll allow you to get a feel for the game, and honestly, I think that working your way up and getting your hands on the sticks of a new ship, having earned it in-game, is one of the most rewarding experiences a new player can have. I'd expect a free fly event with the start of the 323 patch, and around the Invictus launch week event in May, there are bound to be some good deals on starter ship packs. So I would hold out for that if I was getting into the game right now. For the free fly, you'll just need to create an account, and when you do, just be sure to use a referral code since you can't go back and add one afterwards. Mine's the one up on screen, but if you've got any friends who play, just ask them for theirs. I am currently in the process of updating my ship footage catalogue to fit the ultra-wide format I'm using more often now, and with that I'll redo my full ship price guide. But for this video I'm going to go manufacturer by manufacturer and look at the percentage increases patch on patch, highlighting some particularly interesting ones. If you prefer to look at the cold hard figures, I'll also post a sheet showing all the new prices on our new website, frontierconsolidated.com. And that'll go up shortly after this video goes live. Check in the video description down below for a link to that. So starting in alphabetical order, we've got Aegis Dynamics, providing a first look at the scale of some of these changes. For reference, because I do love a good spreadsheet, across all of the 130 ships available to buy in-game in 323, the average price increase is a smidge over 135%. A few points of note for Aegis specifically would include the Vanguards, which are now pricing between 9 and 11.5 million, compared to previous prices of 2 to 3.4. There's also been something of a reordering, which I have to say makes some sense. The Sentinel with its EMP and the Harbinger with its torpedo payload, and now the more expensive of the four, with the relatively more basic Warden and Hoplite becoming the cheaper models of the series. The Gladius sees a fairly standard 104% jump to 2.4 million, putting it very much still in line with the Arrow, which is just under 2 million. There's a big increase at the top end though, with the Hammerhead now becoming the second most expensive ship in game at just south of 48 million credits, a jump of 285%. This is interesting, and maybe points towards some of the bigger ships being more of an org rather than an individual purchase, which in many ways does make a lot of sense. The Reclaimer meanwhile jumps 110% to 31.75 million. Changes to structural salvage in 323 are going to cut the profitability of the top tier salvage ship, but it's still pretty economy breaking. So undoubtedly with these new prices, this is going to be a target for a lot of folks. Anvil Aerospace, Aegis' main competitor in the military space, is up next, and there's quite a bit of variety here. First, we've got proof that not every change is upwards, with the C8R Rescue Pisces actually dropping 19% to 745k. Really cool for the perfect entry-level medical ship. But we do see some standout hikes here. The Atlas platform family of the Spartan, Centurion and Ballista are all seeing big increases. particularly the two anti-air vehicles, both of which now go comfortably north of the 1 million mark. Another big one is the Hurricane, which to be fair was way too cheap previously at 1.2 million. It was a lot more firepower for barely more than a Gladius or Arrow. Its new price of 5.6 million puts it bang in line with the likes of the Scorpius from RSI. Interestingly though, this makes both of these two-person heavy fighters meaningfully out of line with the Vanguards, which are pretty much twice the cost. The Valkyrie dropship, which to my mind is one of the coolest vehicles in SC, is also in line for an eye-watering raise, not leaving you with much change from 20 million credits. Considering how much we use these for org events, this one is going to hurt. And finally, for Anvil, the Carrack, one of SC's previous top two in terms of price, actually doesn't see too much of a hike, only rising 29% to 34.4 million. So that should ease some of the pain of the Valk. Since it's a short list, I'm going to group alien manufacturers, Aopoa, Banu and Asperia together in the interests of time. Brand new for 323, we've got the Santok EI making its way into stores at 9.4 million, which is quite punchy for a medium fighter. But as in the in-game stores, as in the cash shop, alien ships do always come with something of a rarity tax. The Asperia Talons have both been adjusted up, but interestingly CIG have decided to equalise the cost of the gun-focused Talon and the missile-bearing Talon Shrike, both of which will now be 3.3 million credits. Dropships continue to be a bit of a theme when it comes to hefty price increases though, with the Asperia Prowler jumping from 4.2 million to 18.7 in a 340% rise to match the Valkyrie. The big and small orange machines of Argo haven't entirely escaped the increases, but they've all been below the average, so good news for the industrialists out there. Coincidentally, while I haven't crunched the numbers exactly yet, I'm definitely seeing a trend that industrial ships aren't getting hit quite as much as combat ships, which means that in-game ship prices are to an extent moving more in line with the hard currency pricing, where combat focus tends to come at a premium. Probably the most important one to pick out here is the multi-crew miner, the Mole, which sees a 74% price rise to 8.9 million. Consolidated Outland also doesn't have a particularly long list, with most of the entries focusing around the Mustang starter series. It is interesting to see that while the order of expense has stayed the same, the gap between the Alpha and the Beta has been compressed to barely anything. I'm not sure if the hover quad is potentially a typo, having fallen to 56,700 credits. I'm wondering if there's a zero missing off the end of that, and it was intended to go up in line with other hover bikes. The Nomad rises to 1.5 million, which to be honest, in the wider context of the new ship prices, makes it an increasingly appealing option as a runaround for solo players. Crusader Industries is undoubtedly one that's going to cause a few heartbreaks. The Mercury Star Runner, a beloved daily driver for many Star Citizens, sees a 150% increase to 12.3 million credits. But the true pain's going to be felt in the Herc series. The C2 is undoubtedly still SC's premier cargo hauler, and its new price of 18.9 million probably aligns more with the economic benefit of it. The M2 variant's 464% increase to 29.5 million I find just a little bit weirder. It has an extra turret, but it can only take 3/4 of the cargo. With more than 10 million separating these two, I think it's safe to say we'll probably see more C2s than M2s out there. And that gets us to the A2 bomber variant, which with a 702% increase now prices at 44.3 million credits. Jumptown probably just got a whole lot safer. To end on a positive note though, cool to see the C1 and A1 Spirits make their debut in the ship shops at 3.1 million and 5 million respectively. These both look like good buys. Held together by duct tape, the Drake fleet is not getting hit too badly on average by the price hikes. And to be honest, I think this is one of the areas where we see the increase in prices, allowing for a wider range and more differentiation to exist. For example, the Buccaneer, renowned as something of a glass cannon, now prices at 1.7 million, making it cheaper than the higher quality offerings in the light fighter space from Anvil and Aegis. And similarly, the Caterpillar, increasing 166% to 12.5 million, is now decidedly cheaper than the faster, more agile and slightly higher capacity C2. There's a big percentage increase for the Mule, but at the end of the day it's still only 68k. And with ground vehicles in mind, it's interesting to see that in the PTU build at least, the rare Dragonfly Yellow Jacket model has been added. I'd wait and see how the live build works out to make sure that this actually makes it in though. The cutlasses got decidedly below average increases of around 50%, so the Cutty Black at 2.1 million is now going to be even more people's choice as a daily driver. Greycat's a nice short one. Similar to the Mule, we've got massive percentage increases for the PTV and STV ground cars, but both are still cheap as chips. And interestingly, the Rock and Rock DS got slashed in terms of price, with a basic Rock now only setting you back 104k, and its big brother going to 142. Kruger only make two snub ships currently, the P52 and P72, both of which are seemingly fairly hefty price hikes to 283.5k and 450k respectively. In my recent racing video, I absolutely fell in love with the P72, and I've taken to filling my 890 jumps hangar with 9 of them at a time, so that endeavour just got a lot more expensive. The manufacturer MISC was split into two last year, with the main MISC brand continuing to own the more industrially focused ships that the manufacturer was primarily famous for, while the new Mirai brand houses the high-performance vehicles for things like racing. As a mining enthusiast, I'll jump straight in with good news that the Prospector hasn't been hit too badly. With a 42% hike to 2.9 million, it should still be well within reach of budding new miners. Also, as a newly crowned racing enthusiast, while I'll be suffering the increases for the P72s, it's good to see that my other favourite, the Razor, basically isn't seeing much change at all. The MISC Freelancers, alongside the Drake Cutlasses, are a well-trodden jump for many folks making their way out of their first starter ship. And while the increases here aren't too bad in the grand scheme of things, like I said when we looked at Drake, it's cool that there's more of a gap opening up here. The base Freelancer at 3.1 million is a full million more expensive than the Drake competitor, which makes sense in many ways in terms of the amenities on board. One of my favourite ships, the Freelancer Max cargo hauling variant, comes out just shy of 5 million. Still one of the first buys I'll probably make after a wipe though. And the Hull C makes its debut in the ship shops at just shy of 15 million, which to me is a really weird price to be honest. Considering the size difference between this and the C2, which costs 20 million basically, I think this is reflective of their current gap in game utility. I do wonder if we won't see a bigger increase in the cost of the Hull C once it gets more of its spacebound trade routes, since this is quite a big contradiction of the two primo cargo haulers when it comes to their hard currency pricing. Origin Jumpworks, the number one for luxury in SC, already had fairly excessive prices, so it's not a big surprise to see somewhat muted percentage increases, since they still lead to big jumps in terms of credits. The M50 Interceptor might prove quite interesting now, since with its 26% increase to 1.5 million, it's markedly cheaper than the likes of the Arrow or the Gladius. And while it's listed as a racing ship, I know a good few folks who have quite a high opinion of it as a dogfighter. Notable as well is that the 400i's 80% increase to 11.5 million actually means that it comes out cheaper than the MSR's 12.3. At the top end though, there are big buck changes for the 600 series, which rise to 25 million for the touring variant and 27 million for the base Explorer. And of course the 890 Jump retains its crown as the most expensive ship in game, with a 102% increase to 65 million. Meaning there are just even more bragging rights attached to owning one now. Second to last, we've got RSI, Chris's trophy manufacturer. I've already taken note of the Scorpius's placement at around the 5.5 million mark, but a big one for many people is going to be the Connies, which have all jumped a little more than the average. The Taurus, for instance, a cargo hauler's favourite for those who don't want to go to the full mass hauling scale, now sits at 8 million, which I think is actually a really good price. It's now markedly cheaper than the likes of the C2, but there's that much more of a gap over the Freelancer Max, meaning that there's more incentive for traders to cycle up rather than jumping straight to the best-in-class C2. And while the rest of the series, sitting between 10 to 15 million, are going to represent a not insignificant investment, they still compare quite favourably as a multi-role vessel versus the likes of the Vanguards. To be honest, the more I write this script, the more I'm thinking the Vanguards are a bit of an anomaly. But I guess they do have the benefit of size 2 QT drives and a heavy fighter, which is somewhat unique. And finally, we've got Tumbril land systems. Sitting at 28k across the board, Cyclones have arguably been out of whack for some time now, with increases ranging from 292% to 471%, we're seeing some differentiation, and at between 100 and 200k they're still perfectly affordable. The Nova tank doesn't get hit too hard in percentage terms, but similarly to the Atlas series, it's going to eat up pretty much 1 million credits. So just as real world inflation starts to hopefully calm down a bit, digital world inflation got real. And I know some people are not going to be overjoyed at the increasing price of ships in game. But generally as time goes on, I think it'll probably be for the best, and it's better that CIG start hiking prices gradually so people get used to it rather than being a crazy shock right before a beta or a live environment. I also think it might cement things a bit more in terms of org gameplay, with certain ships like the Hammerhead moving beyond the average player's ability to earn solo, encouraging people to group up and pool their cash for such purchases so that they can enjoy them together. If you are looking for a group of people to hang out with in game, then you are always welcome to pop into our Discord, the link's just down in the video description below. One thing which I would probably petition for given these changes is for CIG to start working on some form of part exchange mechanic in game. Like in the real world, cars are expensive, so when I want to get a new one because I started earning more money or my needs changed and I need a station wagon rather than a convertible. Okay, pretty bad example, I live in Scotland and a convertible would never have been a good idea. But anyway, I wouldn't just keep the old car and let it gather dust in my garage. I'd trade it in with the dealer or sell it to ease the pain of the new car's price. And this is similar to the system that Elite Dangerous had, and to be honest I reckon it would be cool for SC to see it added too. As ever, let me know what you think down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please do hit that subscribe button, as I'm going to be soon doing a full rundown of all the ships to buy in game, and some other 323 focused content. I haven't been madly playing the PTU this time around, since I want to keep the patch fresh for myself and not get tired of it before it even goes out. When it's live, I'm really looking forward to all the new content that's coming in. With all that said, thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.